What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Viseland. We are 2 weeks out for the draft. Mikey, what is going on? What's happening in your world?
Really not that much. I went to the dentist on Friday. That was cool. Hadn't been there in a while, so that
That
was like
sounds
a
very,
normal
very
thing.
exciting.
Yeah. Um,
It
but
works.
yeah, showing my teeth to the people not watching on YouTube. But
So
yeah,
he has decent teeth.
yeah, yeah. Lucky enough. But yeah, and also like there's like a new president and everything, and like president-elect at least, and
President-elect, yeah.
they have some evidence. It's coming. It's like a healthcare plan. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming soon. Yeah, we'll wait for it. But yeah, it seems like the new president-elect is likely happening, and the evidence they have so far is. I'm sorry to say fucking bullshit. And seems to be not even like really a thing. But yeah, beyond that, let's get into the topic this week. So we do have the NBA draft coming along. We're going to do one more kind of like we'll kind of do a combined like giving our boards and breakdown, and then a mock draft next week right before the NBA draft. But what we are planning on doing today is we wanted to kind of give an idea of what people should expect out of an NBA draft. And by doing that, we're kind of going to go back through a few NBA drafts where players have kind of become established in the league. So we are going through the drafts of 2003 to 2013 and kind of showing you. A lot of people love to do tiers in the draft, and the way that tiers were always explained to me, they seem to mean different things to different people. The way that they were explained to me initially when they were like a thing was that NBA teams sometimes would use them and say, if I have a guy in tier one, I'm not going to draft a guy in a lower tier because of need. Like it was a thing to separate like the talent from the need, or like the best player available from the need. And then if you have a bunch of guys in the same tier, then you can kind of break it down and do that. I see some people that just have them mean different things. Like, tier one means primary initiator, and like, somebody that you want to run your team through. I think we're going to see that as we go through the years here and break down this draft history, those guys aren't always there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think that the thing that I was kind of pleasantly surprised by is there are a lot more Hall of Famers than I would have thought. Still, obviously, not very many. But yeah, the thing that you'll notice, and this is like the big thing, is like the definition is always broad on this as well, but like franchise players, like, the big thing is, oh, he's going number one this year, but is he a franchise player? Well, that doesn't always happen either. And yeah, we'll see as we go through the years. But I decided to kind of make like basically 5 categories. I wouldn't even call them tiers because I think there's separation even in the categories. But the first one, it seems pretty easy. It's championship centerpieces. And that one is a player that you can build a championship team around, with them being the best player on that team. And yeah, like I'm sure that will have some kind of broad roots as soon as we get lower as well. But and obviously is subject to change with some of the more recent players. Then I have Hall of Famers. That's pretty straightforward, like a player that I believe is going to make the Hall of Fame. And I would think Jason would back me up on this, I hope.
I'm open on the Hall of Fame. I love seeing players get in there.
Oh, really? You're oh, man. Okay, then we may disagree.
We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I find myself sometimes kind of lenient on certain players.
Yeah, I think it definitely depends. And yeah, we probably have some players that we're more partial to. Then I have like a little in-between category, and it's contending pieces. And it's kind of like a guy who was either on like a big piece on a contending team, or like a third or fourth player on a championship team. And I think that it's a pretty broad category as well. But I just noticed with the first draft that I did, like there was a player who didn't really belong in the lower category and just kind of stuck in the middle. Then I have contending role players. These are players who were either like a fifth or sixth best player, or like somebody that was really important on a contending team or a championship team. And then I have role players, and those would be kind of guys who are like, you know, sixth, seventh, eighth man, or like that would be their best position on a championship team. And this is going to be broad as well. And I think some players were probably in between categories, but it's just kind of how we're going to define them here. And just give you an idea of the amount of players you can expect to make like I would say a good NBA impact. So my other thing is the way that I look at the NBA, Jason and I agree on this, that you need to be an amazing player to make the NBA in the first place.
Oh, period. Yeah. No. And there's like that terrible, even if you think they're like a scrub, it's like scrubbed by comparison.
Yeah, absolutely.
The people that are around.
But if you were to break things down, you think there are 30 teams in the NBA. That means that there are 150 good starters if you think about it, right? Like you have 5 guys starting on 30 teams. You think there. So if you're in the top 150 players, you're like doing really, really well. I would say like if you usually in any given year you have like 500 NBA players. So like if you're, let's say, even in like the top 8 players on a team and you're like one of the top 240 players, I would say that would be a good thing. I wanted to kind of like break down like box plus minus and PER and like, you know, do some analytics. I didn't really have the time to do that, but I'm just like, you know, just kind of painting like broad strokes. So these guys, I think that we're naming were along those lines at some point in their career. And like, odds are, and the other thing we're going to break down is longevity of players' careers. And I think you'll find in most drafts that you know, many of them didn't have super long careers. And if you're kind of going through a draft, like the odds are that if you're in like the top 14, 15 players in that draft, like those are going to be likely like the good players of that draft. Once you get beyond there, it's going to get a little questionable as to your actual value, like as an NBA player, like if you were like, you know, like a top player, especially I'm guessing over a prolonged period of time. But yeah, obviously things change and it's different draft to draft, but the odds are that, you know, more than likely, even if you have a long career, like it's kind of about impact. So that's why I found that in most of these drafts that I went over, there were usually like 14 guys that I felt kind of deserved these categories. So yeah. And this will be the first time Jason sees them because I went over them myself.
It's just that kind of thing too, like with a lot of, you know, teams, it's like we're just setting your expectation. You know, like if you're picking 20th in the draft, like, you know, you might not be adding somebody that's going to provide a ton, especially at the jump. But it brings me back.
It's always funny to me the people that kind of expect like starters at like the 25th.
Oh, no, totally.
If that happens, that's amazing. And then, yeah, the other thing is you should temper your expectations by that pick. So like if a guy, of course it's going to be difficult for a player, like, you know, let's say the 21st pick ends up being like a complete steal and is better than the 20th pick. But if you get a guy who's like a good value at that pick, that's something to be happy about.
Yeah. There's always that excitement around like playoff contending teams. They're like, oh, but we also got this guy in the first round. It's like, yeah, he's probably not going to get that much burn. Like, hopefully you got to steal it.
Yeah, it's really rare that rookies like make a big impact for the team. And even like younger players, like, you know, if a younger player is doing well in the playoffs, that's usually a sign that they're very, very good.
No, it's definitely few and far.
Even, okay, like let's say, okay, we'll throw it out this year. Tyler Hero, and Kendrick Nunn. So the Heat had 2 players in their rotation who were rookies. Kendrick Nunn barely played in the playoffs. Did have a good game or so in the finals, but also he struggled. I would say Tyler Hero in the conference finals was really good, but if you look at it like from an analytics standpoint, he was basically like break even. And then, which is still like pretty good as like let's say he was the fourth guy in that series.
On the finals team.
Then by the time he got to the finals, he had a couple good games there, but he had a couple not so good games. He really struggled. And then, if you look at his like net rating, like there's a lot left to be desired. The fact that he still was playing on a team and doing like he obviously was a steal of a pick at 14, and like I think he has a very bright future. But it's just kind of an example of kind of I guess it's tough to make that impact early in your career, which is why we're kind of going over guys who are further along in their careers or drafts where they're almost all of the players from that particular draft are done with their careers. So we'll start with 2003, which was considered a really good draft, mainly because of the top of that draft, which was
the top is insanely strong.
So we've gone over that draft before, and just to say, like, that top 5 is completely ridiculous. And if Darko would have been like even like a decent player, that like it might have competed for one of the best top 5s in NBA history. I would say, I don't know, I guess you could go over like 1984 because they have 3 players who Sam Bowie wasn't as bad as Darko, I would say, at least in his high points. And then Sam Perkins wasn't bad either. But
the top 5 out as a team, if they form their own team, which they kind of sort of.
Oh, even if it had Darkman.
Yeah.
Darkman won a championship as a rookie.
He's the only one that could say that.
Play, but he was on a championship team as a rookie. But yeah, we just going over that one. So starting with championship centerpieces, and I think you have to consider 2 players here. Obviously, the guy who would be like in his own tier and generational, like a definition of a generational talent, is LeBron James. But Dwayne Wade was a championship centerpiece. And the way he won the championship, he may have had like a bit more of a complete team when he did it. Definitely didn't have a second player as good as like he was when LeBron won his ring, or at least his first ring. I would say even his second ring. Dwayne was still probably better than Shaq was comparatively. But Dwayne Wade during the 2006 NBA Finals, like that was a guy you built a championship team around. Even the year before, he was amazing, and he was amazing like for years after that. And then even in the 2011 Finals, was the Heat's best player during that series. So I would say you put Dwayne Wade in there, and I'm guessing Dwayne Wade likely ranks among like the top like 25 or so best players of all time, whereas LeBron is like in the very if he's not in your top 5, there's something up. If he's not in your Mount Rushmore, there's probably something up. But yeah. And then so going on to Hall of Famers, I went with 2 guys who I feel were perennial all-stars and absolutely like carried some teams, may have never carried them to an extreme high level. I guess Melo was the best player on a conference finals team. Chris Bosh ended up being a crucial player on those Heat teams, and then would have had many good years after that. But I feel like Chris Bosh, even with a shortened career, had done more than enough to merit Hall of Fame consideration, and to me, he should be in the Hall of Fame. And then, so yeah, you have those 4 guys at the top. They were the 1, 3, 4, and 5 pick. And then the other guy who is, I would say, a level below those 4 would be David West. And David West did eventually, get his ring when he was on Golden State, made a couple All-Star games, and was a crucial player on like an Indiana team that like kind of pushed some of LeBron's teams to the brink. So yeah, I would say was I considered him a contending piece as opposed to a contending role player. And he was, at least for a while.
Well, that's what the end of his career too. He was taking those kind of 1-year deals because he wasn't on San Antonio as well. So he's,
Yeah.
he was a guy that was very much trying to help these teams get over a hump.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, he was on. Yeah, he was on San Antonio right before he went to.
Went to Golden State.
Went to Golden State, won those last 2 rings.
Yeah, he's doing those veteran minimum
It
deals.
was like their 7th or 8th man, and yeah, I still consider him a contending piece just because he was quite good during those early years, and yeah, I feel like there's a little separation between David West and the next group. The amazing thing with this draft is they have like tons of guys that make all-star teams. A lot of them only make one or like a couple, but yeah, they have 4 perennial guys and then 5 other guys that make all-star teams. And having 9 players make the all-star team from one draft is like a lot.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. They also like just had some really unique talents here. So on to contending role players. I had Boris Diaw, who I think was a contending role player with a few different teams, and then finally got over the top of San Antonio.
Yeah.
But yeah, just an awesome player, like defensively, great passer, and could provide a little offense as well. Then you had Kyle Korver, one of the best shooters in NBA history, a guy that you just cannot leave open. And yeah, he was a crucial part of many very good teams. Josh Howard, who for a while looked like he had a very, very bright future in the NBA, was one of Dallas's best players when they initially made the finals in 2006, and just kind of had a pretty rough drop off, but still was
his good years were definitely
pretty very solid wing.
Yeah.
2 other guys I put in there. I put in Mo Williams. He's probably more of like the next category, but I put him in because he was on some of those LeBron James teams, and he did make an all-star team. But I think a large part of it was just because of how great LeBron was. But yeah, was on a team or on a couple teams that won tons of games and at least had a shot at making it to the NBA Finals. And then
is a 6th man too. I think that was a big role for him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah, he was a good microwave scoring 6th man.
Yeah.
And then Kirk Heinrich was a guy who I just feel like he was on some of those good Bulls teams, and he could have been on some I think he could have been like a contending role guy somewhere else. And then in the last category, the role players, I have Leandro Barbosa. He probably could be on contending role players too because he was great with Phoenix. And obviously, when he played with Golden State, he was a valuable piece as well. And just a good role player through his career. Nick Collison, who is a guy who, when I initially did I did an article for NBADraft.net. It was very basic, but it was just kind of a what to expect when you're drafting in certain spots. And the median guy for the 12th pick was Nick Collison. Nick Collison was you should be pretty happy if you get a Nick Collison.
Yeah.
And yeah, just a pretty solid role player for many years with Seattle, Oklahoma City. I would say Chris Kaman on there. He was an all-star. He never really was on a winning team per se, but he it was pretty good and obviously put up numbers. And I think in a situation where he could have been a role player, I think that would have been a good thing for him. I guess you can consider this guy a contending role player, but I also think it was just he was lifted up by his situation, and that's Kendrick Perkins, who's the last guy I had on this list. And yes, he was good on Boston when they won the championship as their 5th starter. I would say there were still other players who I would probably have taken in front of him for that team, James Posey being one of them. And then like I know he was hurt during the last game in 2010, I guess, when the Lakers beat the Celtics in 7 games. Yeah, so he was injured, or was it 2011?
I just remember he eventually got to the point where he was hurt a lot and then kind of fizzled. But I think he made, some decent impact earlier in his career.
It was 2000. Oh man, sorry. I just want to make sure. We want Kate right here on Viseland. Yes, it was 2010, and he was injured. And Kevin Garnett claims that if Kendrick Perkins was healthy, then the Celtics would have won the series.
And who knows? Maybe if they won the series, maybe we wouldn't have to see him on the jump on ESPN so often. But
I think that would probably have put him on there earlier, Jason.
Yeah, things don't always work out the way. Yeah, he's not my favorite commentator, but bless him, he's out there.
Let's just say I think he has an agenda, Mr. No Agendas. But yeah, he has a few agendas. But I think that would be the last guy there. Now, if you look at the 2003 draft in general, it's kind of amazing because they have a number of guys who have like 10-year careers, and that's like they have 27 guys who have over 10-year NBA careers. Like the average is usually about like 6 years, and it's usually not as many players in a given draft. And then if you go to like the over 6-year plateau, it gets to 33. So yeah, there were quite a few, but when you're looking through it, like there are guys who are role players, but probably not on teams that are going very far. And like, for instance, like a guy who just on the outskirts, probably like, you have like Dante Jones, Steve Blake, Luke Ridenour, Willie Green, Matt Bonner with his shooting prowess. So yeah, just a few guys to mention there. Yeah, Travis Outlaw, I guess, is another one you could kind of think of. You got
he's never, unfortunately, like he never really played on that many good teams.
Oh, Mikael Pietrus was pretty good for a while, but yeah, he was on, I think, a team that like rousingly made it to the second round, albeit in spectacular fashion. But yeah, that's kind of where the list goes there. Let's move on to 2004. For Hall of Famers, I have Dwight Howard, who was almost a championship centerpiece and just won an NBA championship, but I don't think you could call him a championship centerpiece. They did lose in 5 games to the Los Angeles Lakers. It was a well-built team around Dwight Howard, but yeah, for a while he was the NBA's best center, multiple Defensive Player of the Year, and one of the best rebounders in NBA history. So he is head and shoulders above the other Hall of Famer, I feel, which is Andre Iguodala. And I feel like Andre Iguodala is a Hall of Fame player. He has only made one All-Star team, but he just has made and albeit not completely his doing, but he made 6 straight NBA finals.
Oh no, yeah, and he gets that Finals MVP as well. I think that's what that's what puts him over the hump. I think if it's just one All-Star game and he doesn't really make any finals,
you can wonder how much he earned the Finals MVP. Probably should have gone to Steph Curry, but it was he did really well in that series. And I think also shooting like 38% from the line, which is kind of funny. But yeah, he played great defense on LeBron James, and he's just like this consummate role player who does a little bit of everything, can handle the ball, great passer, really good defender. When he's hitting shots, it's pretty much over. It was part of one of the NBA's most dangerous lineups over like 5 years in Golden State. And I don't know if he was like the reason the Heat made the NBA Finals, but it certainly didn't hurt having him there.
Well, I think putting him on the court was that different matchup, like in that series too, and I think that's what like when they went that smaller lineup with Andre Iguodala.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like the big difference for him. But yeah, I think the finals and the Finals MVP, that's what gets him in the Hall of Fame. But you never know. I mean, Chauncey Billups still hasn't gotten
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Me neither. He was a Finals MVP where he was the best player,
But
and
he hasn't been retired for very long either. So yeah, but it was just stupid that he didn't get in. I don't know. I feel like Reggie Miller didn't even get in first ballot, which was just completely ridiculous. And I am a person that's not a particular fan of Reggie Miller.
yeah, but it's hard to
I
like.
respected him a lot as a player, and he should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. Contending Pieces, I had one, and he's also like kind of between some guys in like this next category, and that's Lowell Dang. And I just feel like he was a good player on a number of different good teams, and if he were in the right situation, he could have been like maybe a third guy on like a championship team, like a third or fourth guy. I think would have been a possibility. Then after him, I had contending role players. I had Jameer Nelson, who was on the Magic team that made it to the NBA Finals against the Lakers in 2009, I guess. And then Trevor Ariza was on the Lakers team in 2009 also, or was actually on the Lakers team in 2009, and then has just been a nice like piece for contending teams for quite a while now. Somebody that you just kind of go after, and I think he would have really helped out the Blazers in the postseason. Tony Allen, part of that Boston team in 2008, was always like a guy that just made your team like a little bit better. Was part of Memphis when they made it to the conference finals. He was a guy like an archetype that a lot of people were looking for, as like that fifth starter or like bench guy who provides like that ridiculous defense and slashing ability.
Super gritty defender, and that's what.
Yeah. And then role players, you have one-time All-Star, I believe. Yes. Yeah. Devin Harris. You have Josh Smith, who had his playoff moments as well. He's a role player, though.
Yeah, he is a role player. He's a role player.
Exactly. This is going down. Another guy I have is a role player, but was a role player on a contending team, and just a nice piece to have. I think injuries probably are the reason that he's not like that next level higher. Sean Livingston, who was just like money for mid-range, could play make, and just provided like a matchup issue that many teams wish they could have had. It's hard for me to like. He probably could be considered a contending role player because he was pretty instrumental to the 2016 championship team. But I had to put him in role players.
Yeah, because, I think that Golden State team is easier to beat.
I'm talking about somebody else. I've moved on. I'm moving on. J.R. Smith. J.R. Smith is the guy that I'm talking about there. He was a big part of that 2016 championship team, but I think you at best you want J.R. Smith being a role player.
And honestly, he must be like a nice guy because LeBron wanted to bring him back to the Lakers because you think they would never talk again after.
Well, they needed somebody else, and he had championship experience. What can you say? Was he a reason at all they won this year? I would say no, but he was part of it. It's like David S. Pumpkins, the B-Boy Skeletons. They're part of it.
Yeah.
And so then the other guys I'll go with Al Jefferson, who was like good for a number of years, just has pretty limited upside, and his teams never seem to like win games. Maybe because he wasn't a role player and he was like, they needed more out of him than he was probably capable of doing. At a high level. Kevin Martin, who I think, Oklahoma City said, okay, we'll trade James Harden. We're worried about our cap situation. Kevin Martin was kind of like the big piece of that and didn't really work out. He's a really good shooter.
Yeah, good shooter. He's not James Harden.
It wasn't replacing James Harden. Yeah. It just wasn't going to happen. And then I'll go with the second and third picks from that draft. Not even necessarily in that order, but the UConn guys, Ben Gordon and Emeka Okafor. neither of them were on like amazing teams or anything like that. But I think they could have been parts of teams like in the right situation.
Well, Ben Gordon,
And I think at the very least you call them role players.
he's a you know, I really liked what he did at UConn. Meeting him in person, he's a tremendous tool. So like
Oh damn, that's fired.
I can't get super behind him once you meet him because he wasn't like the nicest, coolest person, and his credit card got declined. That was also not a good experience on him as well. And he started taking, yeah, it was a fun time. Basically, he started taking stuff out of the store because it's Ben Gordon. He's going to pay for it, and then his card kept getting declined, and he couldn't pay for it. So then we had to go back outside and take the stuff away from him. And then that went about as you would have envisioned. Yeah.
Maybe I'm taking him off the list.
No, he deserves to be on the list. I respect what he did as a player. I think he, you know, I had higher expectations coming out of UConn, like what he could be, because again, I thought he was going to be one.
Maybe that was why he wasn't on some contending teams.
But yeah, he was not
he got his money from Detroit, and that was like about it.
Well, apparently, he didn't get enough to pay for that Visa card.
Yeah, I guess. I know something going on there.
Yeah, like this draft was a very like high school explosion. Yeah, there's just a lot of guys that like
a high school explosion draft. Yep.
Super missed the mark. You know, it's just like you look back at this draft too. You got your Robert Swifts and Telfair and you know, just a lot of.
And then so we said last time there were 27 players from the 2003 draft that had 10-year careers. This one is 22. And then 25 who were over 6, but yeah, like that mark is over 8 basically. And then from the 26th player, which is Luke Jackson on, those guys all had under 5-year careers. So yeah, not a super ton of guys with long-term careers here. And then yeah, like we kind of notice a pretty big drop off as well. A guy I probably could have mentioned was Anderson Varejao.
I was gonna say that because you know he definitely had a role on some teams.
Yeah, like I'm not saying it's like limited to 14 guys. Like it's probably pretty fluid up to like it's just once you get past 20, I think you're usually kind of like pushing guys who were like really good players at one time or like you know kind of like crucial pieces. So yeah, just again we're just kind of trying to give people an idea of what to expect and like maybe like this could affect the way that you look at tiers or affect the way that you look at the draft. So moving on to 2005, we have one player who stands head and shoulders above the rest, and that is Chris Paul. Like no question.
Oh, no, yeah.
And I always remember like going into the year, like feeling that Chris Paul was like the favorite to be number 1 almost. Like, you know, he had a really good freshman year at Wake Forest and he was one of the best players in college basketball. I guess people worried about his size or something along those lines. But yeah, Chris Paul, I think always was considered a really damn good player. And I think they just kind of overthought it. And they should have just gone with the guy who looked like he was an absolute stud.
And also the fact that the Clippers are a respectable team / franchise is like, that's like a lifetime achievement award right there.
Yeah. We'll see. I don't know. They have a guy further down the list who I think you might even rank ahead of Chris Paul currently on the all-time list just because of what he's accomplished. But yeah, Chris Paul, I think is like really slept on. I think he's at least a top 40 all-time player, like possibly even top 30. Maybe like he's at least one of the best players never to have won an NBA championship, or I guess he's never been to an NBA finals.
Finals, yeah, no.
But yeah, I just think he's a fantastic player. I always have loved watching him play and respected his game and his ability to like just take these teams and make them respectable, which is something I feel he was a large part of this year with Oklahoma City, with definite help from other guards and players there. But yeah, he has just done so many things over the years to make his teams like better than they would have been otherwise, and or at least like closer to contention than they would have been otherwise. Contending pieces. See, I have Chris Paul as a Hall of Famer. Obviously, don't have him as a championship centerpiece because he never got to the NBA Finals. Maybe under the right circumstances, but I have him as a Hall of Famer. The other guy, I thought of him as a Hall of Famer, but I don't know if he necessarily has the resume. Deron Williams. I thought at one point he was like surefire.
Yeah, he was one of the better point guards in the league for a bit, but yeah, just never.
Yeah, like I think he could have been like the second or third best player on a championship team like during his peak, and like made it to like a conference finals and like yeah he was really good. Like there was a time where he was really good. There was a time where he used to give Chris Paul fits too, like when they would match up against each other. He was the bigger guy. He was drafted ahead of Chris Paul mainly because of his size.
He's a big.
That also was fantastic in college as well at Illinois.
No, like when I met him, he was a big dude for a point guard. Like, because I met Chris Paul and Deron Williams. It's like, and also Deron Williams, super nice guy. I was trying to put a shoe away that was very high, and he helped me with that. That's what you do, Ben Gordon.
I think that's the 8'2" standing reach. I'm guessing.
Yeah,
I'm flat out guessing that with Deron Williams.
Well, he definitely had that bulk size that like a lot of point guards don't. It's
Jason has actually like. What's the full extension of your reach? Can you do that for us?
Oh, I'm like 5'5" and my reach is probably like 5'4".
Jason can only reach his hand slightly below his forehead.
Forehead, probably.
That was above your forehead. Stop it.
This is my strong suit, but yeah. No, dude, yeah, Deron Williams just like, never got in those situations, and I definitely could have played a different role on, some.
I'd say he'd be the second guy in this draft still.
Oh, for sure.
Like all things considered. And then, with contending role players, I went with 3 guys. And one of them is Danny Granger, because I feel like at Danny Granger's peak, he was probably that. Like, yes, he was like just mainly a scorer and all that, but he, like Danny Granger was pretty damn good when he was at his peak and like had a few really high scoring seasons. And then I think it was also part of like the Indiana teams when they were like in the realm of contention.
They're like a frustrating playoff team. Like they give you a good series, but they never got over like that hump.
I would say Andrew Bogut definitely counts there, and he was a pretty big part of the first Golden State Warriors championship team. And I know some people will say that Andrew Bogut not playing in 2016 was the reason that the Warriors lost the NBA Finals. I disagree with that statement.
Yeah, no, I think Bogut's a very skilled player. I think the only problem for him is the more you learn about him off the court, obviously he moves down a lot of tiers in the list.
Yeah.
Friggin' nut job. But no, he was a decent player, like definitely
Australian legends, and when he was healthy, like ridiculous defender, really good passer, good around the basket, like good smart player.
The kind of player that Golden State brought back after he finished in Australia for the year. Like he came on for that just like end of season playoff run. Yeah, super.
Yeah, to lose the NBA Finals. That's
what I mean. They need to have him there.
Another guy. This is like maybe pushing it with him. But I think he would have been a pretty crucial player for the Clippers team if they went further this year. Lou Williams, who's another player, as I've always said, like when you're trying to find a bench scorer, like everybody is comparing people in the draft to Lou Williams. You're hoping to get a Lou Williams microwave type scorer, guy who's ridiculous in isolation, getting his own shot off the bounce, super fast, and can put up points in a hurry. So yeah, Lou Williams I have as a contending role player. Now on to role players. I guess the reason he's a role player is because of the length of his career, likely. But he was pretty crucial to a couple championship teams, and that's Andrew Bynum. I remember, at least for like one of them, I called it like the corpse of Andrew Bynum, like because he was so injured. He was still like one of their most crucial players also.
I feel for the Lakers, like at that time, it was like, again, you had Bynum on the block in the low post. You had Powell in the high post, and then you had Kobe outside. Like that was such a good like.
Or like an Ariza. Well, you had Lamar Odom. You had an Ariza or
Oh no, totally. But I
Meta
think
World
that
Peace or Test.
those were the three core.
Himself.
The three core guys of that team were just like Bynum was big. Like Bynum had that potential as a center. But obviously, like, you know, injuries just caught up with him quickly and maybe some attitudinal things along the way. But yeah, like those Lakers championship teams with Bynum, like he was a very good player. But yeah, unfortunately his career doesn't hold up to that.
Another player who never was like obviously got outplayed by the people he was drafted in front of, but still was a pretty solid role player, I would say, is Marvin Williams. Like, you know, good shooter, defender, could defend multiple positions. Just announced that he's retiring.
Yeah.
He was with Milwaukee. He was for years on Atlanta. He was with Utah. So yeah, Marvin Williams is another guy I'd say role player. David Lee, role player, made an All-Star game.
Yeah.
And then when the Warriors finally got really good, like they were bad for so long with like David Lee as their guy. And then when they got really good, David Lee just stopped playing completely. So yeah, he probably would have been best as like a real guy, but still, you know, was putting up numbers. It drops off after this. I'll say quite a bit after David Lee. Marcin Gortat, who was good, but you know, yeah, I'd say you definitely would consider him a role player. Monte Johnson,
Monte Ellis.
What?
Monte Ellis in this draft as well.
Oh, for sure.
Had some super.
Good point. Yeah.
Had some super strong years.
Yeah, I don't know how. I guess I just forgot to put Monte on my list, but yeah, we'll add Monte Ellis for sure.
Yeah.
Channing Frye.
No, Channing Frye, solid career.
Stretch big.
Yeah.
That was a big, like for the while, if you were thinking of a stretch big, it was pretty much Channing Frye. I would say Raymond Felton. He's definitely a role player. Like not like if Raymond Felton was one of the best players on your team, odds are your team wasn't going very far. But he
I mean, at that point, you could throw Nate Robinson at the same category. Like
probably.
Because Nate Robinson, at least again, was never probably going to be your starting guy, you know, due to size kind of things. But like Raymond Felton was always kind of slightly disappointing.
So CJ Miles, who's still around. You wonder for how much longer, but like really solid shooter. I don't know about the D part of the 3-and-D, but like a guy who can get you some buckets, decent size as a wing, and one of the last high school guys, as this was last year for Prep to Pro.
Yeah.
And then Ersan Ilyasova, another one of those like stretch four kind of guys. You don't know how old he actually is. One of the guys from Turkey who there were lots of rumors about how old he was and everything, but he ends up having a pretty solid NBA career and being a role guy on a few different teams. So yeah.
And I would say Jared Jack also, you know, had a couple as a role guy.
Jared Jack is just I'll have him just outside of that. But yeah, so when you're like considering the rest of the draft class, so this is one where they have 24 guys who have a 10-year career, and then they have 35 who play over 6. So yeah, it's interesting. And then the amount of games it varies and everything like that. But yeah, so just as we say, like, you know, about like 15, 16 guys who are pretty solid, and obviously like variations from the top and along the way. 2006.
Yeah.
This is a tough one.
Now's where the fun really begins, and you're really gonna take a deep look at
2006. So 2000, as we say, 2005 is last year of Prep to Pro,
and it shows.
It wasn't a really strong like Prep to Pro class. Like obviously there are a few guys who turn out pretty good. Like you have Lou Williams, you have Monte Ellis, Andrew Bynum, at least for a while.
But those are all second round, like other than Bynum, those are second round guys that were really
And then CJ Miles, who had a long career. But yeah, so that class, usually the prep to pro guys would kind of like take out that class, but that class like wasn't super deep anyway with the guys going to college. And that's the year they decide that you have like people in the 2006 high school class, of course, Greg Oden and Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, you guys have to go to college. That's when they make the, you need to be 1 year removed and make the age limit. And so they knew that draft was going to be pretty much a train wreck.
Yeah,
nobody wanted the number one pick in that draft. The team that got the number one pick in that draft is, of course, the Toronto Raptors, who were finally allowed to get the number one pick.
After
their moratorium of being able to get the number one pick. You can see I'm not very bitter about it. But yeah, I have 2 Hall of Famers from this draft, and there would have been a third for sure, but he unfortunately got hurt. But the 2 Hall of Famers that I have are LaMarcus Aldridge and Kyle Lowry. And LaMarcus Aldridge and Kyle Lowry, I think, are the guys, if you were to do a redraft, you would kind of go between those 2 guys. LaMarcus has had been like a solid player for a longer period of time. Kyle Lowry, of course, doing like the little things and getting further over the last number of years, and has been probably considered a better player in the league for the last few years. Yeah. And obviously was I would say the 3rd best player on the championship team when the Raptors won their title.
Yeah.
Very
important.
Yeah, and just has been super valuable and has made the Raptors either overachieve or just like do well for a really long time, and has made all those All-Star games as well.
And it hurts to see this too, and just because of injury, Brent.
Yeah. So I have Brandon Roy in the next category. I have him as the contending piece.
But
I think if Brandon Roy were healthy, he would either be like the 1st or 2nd best player on a competing team. He just was really, really good when he was healthy.
Yeah.
And seemed to be at least shooting towards that. The Blazers did look like they were set up to compete, and then just injuries struck, and Greg Oden, of course, got hurt. One time, like Wesley Matthews, they kind of were banking on him to be able to play, and he wasn't around. There were lots of things that hit the Blazers pretty hard.
Yeah, totally. Brandon Roy just goes on to that.
But yeah, Brandon Roy would have been a contending piece, and I feel I have to put him there, even though in a redraft you probably just go with him a little bit lower because of how short his career was. Unfortunately,
I think body of work provided was so high.
Then I have another contending piece is Paul Millsap. I just think he's been so solid over his career. And then, he was one of the better players on those Atlanta teams that were really good. Granted, they got waxed, but
hey, but he was still out there. He's still out there on Denver.
I would say he's probably more like contending role player ish, but he's in that like gray area of like could have been like maybe like the 3rd or 4th best player on a championship team, and then especially at his peak. I guess Rondo probably goes there. I have him as a contending role player, and he was my only one in the 2006 draft. I had him because I felt like when Boston was like winning their championships, like he was firmly like their 4th or so guy.
Yeah.
Maybe in 2010 he was like had kind of gotten into the 3rd guy territory. You probably put him in. Contending pieces, but yeah, he's hovering around one of those areas, and obviously he had some great moments in this championship run this past year, and playoff Rondo seems to be a thing, and he shows up in the postseason and has had a really solid career and made a few all-star teams, Rondo, one of the best players from that draft. And then role players, I don't have a ton. This draft, like, really, I think injuries really hit this draft like pretty hard. But yeah, like there just aren't a ton who I would consider like even like the role player level. Rudy Gay, I think you have to have in there. JJ Redick,
Yeah.
for sure, one of the best shooters in NBA history. Thabo Sefolosha was just always a guy who seemed to, make some other teams better. And then, is this one where?
It's an interesting
Oh
draft.
yeah, okay. Oh damn. PJ Tucker is definitely in this as well. Yeah. So I'd have PJ Tucker, and then the last one. It's hard for me to say this because he didn't really have a great career, but I just feel like there were flashes where if he were in the right situation, he could have been a pretty decent role player. Andrea Bargnani, like he was talented. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
He just shouldn't have been like the second or third best player on a team. Like he was talented, and like if he were like that offensive big off the bench, I don't know. I guess his defense was just so horrendous.
Yeah.
But I still roll with the Andrea Bargnani being like a pretty talented player thing.
No, totally for sure. It's just it's hard because you have to look at him in that goggles up. He was the first pick. So your bar is always set, high on that. But no, I think again, good player. But yeah, like definitely towards the lower, tier of this. And then, some of the other guys, at the top of this draft, obviously like Adam Morrison injuries, Tyrese Thomas just horrible at basketball.
Yeah.
That was his biggest detriment.
It wasn't great. Yeah.
Like Sheldon Williams kind of flamed out. Like there's so many,
man, yeah, Sheldon Williams just went way too high.
yeah, there's so many guys in this draft, and then there's like interesting guys in this draft too that had like long careers, but like, you have like your Steve Novak, like he got 11 years in. You got like Ryan Holland.
Yeah, because he was a great shooter. Like that, obviously, he had the one skill that really stood out.
Ryan Hollins did 10 years in the league. Like,
yeah, now he's a horrendous announcer, and yeah, 10-year careers in this draft, 12.
Yeah, like it's a pretty.
And I think it'll be 13 next year with PJ Tucker. But yeah, because PJ Tucker spent a lot of time in Europe, and yeah, there were a number of years where it took PJ Tucker to make it to the NBA before he became like a solid player, and I'd say had one of the better careers of anybody in this draft.
No, totally. And again, he probably has the most sneakers of everyone in this draft combined, so he's doing all right for himself.
Yeah,
he's living his
very
best
well
life.
could be.
Pick ups to PJ Tucker, the sneaker.
That very well could be. Then when you go to the 6-year threshold, you had 24 people. And then if you go to 7 years, you have 19. 8, you have 17. So yeah, not a ton of guys with like super long or prestigious careers here. And I couldn't even get to like a full 14 guys. So it was
a weak draft at the time, and like a weak draft in historical perspective too. Like it's really
2007. I think wasn't necessarily as weak of a it definitely wasn't, because you get a player there who I have in like a higher tier than the past few drafts. So yeah, from 2004 to 2006, you have 5 Hall of Fame guys. But then in 2007, you get back to a level that I think everybody would want in their player from any given draft, a championship centerpiece. Yeah. And that is Kevin Durant. And Kevin Durant is, I would say, one of the best scorers in NBA history, top 15 or so player, likely going to be top 10. Hopefully he's healthy and has at least, like 5 or 6 good years, maybe more. But yeah, he missed this entire season, obviously, and you just feel like he's a 7-footer. He's 7 feet tall. Like everybody knows this. He's 7 feet tall. He has like this insane wingspan, and he has skills that like nobody his size has ever had. And everybody tries to emulate, but like nobody has really come close.
No, you also have to be that like 7 feet with that insane wingspan that he has. Just like the way he gets his shot off. Like, yeah, he's definitely a generational
How
scorer.
well he shoots. Like, that's the other thing. Like, ridiculous shooter, and finally wins his rings with Golden State, and is the best player in both of those finals with Golden State, at least for Golden State, I should say. He and LeBron had a fun matchup, but yeah, he plays like incredible basketball in both those finals. Played well even in the first NBA finals that he was in also, like just from a perspective of like being one of the best scorers in the NBA. Like, and if you have to compare him to LeBron James, you're probably taking Kevin Durant as a scorer. You're just taking LeBron for everything else, like in finishing at the basket and everything. But even Kevin Durant's great at that. He's like unstoppable in the post because he can just shoot over everybody. You have to fall for all of his moves. But yeah, so 2007, you feel like there were 2 championship centerpieces, but there ends up being one, and that's Kevin Durant. Hall of Famers. I'm going with 2. They may be a stretch.
Yeah.
But I'm going with 2, and I'm going with Marc Gasol, and I'm going with Al Horford. And it's tough to say either. But I just think they were good. Multiple all-star teams. And like have been on like a number of contending teams also. Teams that have like almost got to the championship, and then finally Marc Gasol gets to the championship, albeit like as like I'd say probably like the 5th best player on that team, but still wins an NBA championship, won a Defensive Player of the Year, his work with Spain. And then Al Horford, I just think has been good for a really long time. The contract with Philadelphia, I think, is obviously like a damper on that team situation. Yeah, it's hard to take away that Al Horford has been like a really solid NBA player for a number of years. And yeah, I feel like he's probably done enough to make the Hall of Fame. So if he wouldn't, I would have to have him as a contending piece also. But I don't have any contending pieces in this draft. I have contending role players, and I have that as Mike Conley Jr., who is one of the best players never to make an NBA All-Star team, and Joakim Noah, who made an NBA All-Star team and was a good player on some really good teams. But I would say he's a competitor for sure. Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't say he was a contending piece, and maybe he could have been in like his best of times. But yeah, of the 4 All-Stars in this draft, like he is, I would say a level below the other 3, which are Kevin Durant, Marc Gasol, and Al Horford. And then part of that was injuries in his career also. Role players, not a ton, I feel. And I have Thaddeus Young, who, you know, has been a good role player, been able to score with some teams, done some decent things in the playoffs. Jeff Green, who did some good things for Houston this past year, but has done some good things in the past also. And I think was a real crucial part to Cleveland making the NBA Finals in 2018. And Marco Bellinelli, I have as a role player. Just he's not necessarily putting your team over the top, but he was a fantastic shooter. Aaron Aflalo, I feel like at his high points was also like a good role player, so I have him there as well. But yeah, after that it gets like pretty slim pickings. Like
I said, again, like I think maybe because he never played on like really good teams was Nick Young. I think he had the talent level.
Yeah,
or that it's just I think again like focus.
Yeah,
and you know like again he was like his peak days were like the times when the Lakers when like nobody was watching because like Kobe was hurt, and then it was just like
it's just Nick Young was so one-dimensional too.
Oh, he's
that's the reason why I leave him off, and like his dimension wasn't as good as like a Marco Bellinelli.
He's a super nice person, so like I
like, you know, when we got to watch Nick Young play like people who weren't in the NBA.
Yeah, this is so Michael and I, we went to go watch a friend of his was playing in kind of like an open run for kind of like professional players of all.
Shout out to Nathan.
Professional players of like all levels, and Nick Young shows up, and this is the summertime in Los Angeles. It is a little toasty outside, but Nick Young shows up in like full on pants, like kind of like a shirt. Like he looks like he just came out of a club.
I would say they were Adidas Capris. Sir?
Yeah, and he looks like he came out of like
they were full on pants.
Yeah, he's still got his, like,
they were mostly pants.
But yeah, he's still got like jewelry on and everything like that, and he like literally just walks in the gym, and of course like there's that like sort of like you're like because you're watching these guys and you're like you recognize a lot of these guys from college and stuff like that. You've heard of them, and then you see Nick Young, and it's like, oh, this guy's at a completely different level. And he literally just comes, plays for a little while, destroys everybody's hopes and dreams, and then just leaves. Like peacefully leaves to probably go, into his Bentley and back to a club. Like, yeah, I just as a fan, like, and I've met him on a number of instances, and I have some mutual friends, like, love Nick Young as a person, but yeah, just focus, determination. Like those were kind of his issues in the NBA, core instinct. Obviously for role players, like personally, selfishly, like obviously Aaron Brooks.
Yeah, again, I was thinking that also.
He had a couple good
as much as I love him, like yeah, he like when he was at his best, he was that. But yeah, it's just
no. I think
when you take like the entire body of work into account.
No, he definitely had
Wilson Chandler was somebody that I thought about putting on the list too, but just left him off.
Yeah, he had some series like when the Lakers couldn't guard point guards. Like that was their thing. It was like Derek Fisher was a point guard, like wasn't really necessarily going to match up against a quicker guy. But it's
like Aaron Brooks was just like water bug quick and like could get his own shot. And
you definitely get some good longevity. It's interesting. There's some guys that have longevity too that you're Josh McRoberts of the world, and you're like,
yeah.
You did 11.
Like for instance, like Brandon Wright like plays 10 years but only plays 428 games.
Yeah.
Josh McRoberts only plays 433. Like yeah, so you have 20 guys who play over 10 years. Then yeah, Carl Landry should have Carl Landry was also a guy that I seriously thought about. Thiago Splitter too.
Ronnie Stuckey as well had like a. People had hope.
Yeah, I don't know. He was just he was also like a really one-dimensional guy. And was never on like really good teams. That was the big thing.
Yeah, that obviously always hurts a legacy.
Oh, Rudy, man, yeah.
But Rudy
only played 4 years in the NBA. Yeah, he would have been
personal fave. Loved Rudy Fernandez, but again, 4 years in the NBA, and unfortunately,
And then he's played in EuroLeague for years and been a great player there.
Yeah, the NBA wasn't meant for like.
Yeah, it was just too bad. Really pick it out.
Oh, totally. He was one of the more enjoyable players to watch during those years in Portland.
Yeah. So yeah, I really don't have too many players from this draft. But yeah, you get the one huge player, and then you get a couple of guys who are quite good, albeit like the big positions. Like a lot of this draft had just tons of big guys, and if you look through it, you'll see like they aren't necessarily like the guys that you strive for today, and like the primary initiators or like the 3-and-D guys. Like not a ton of those in this draft. So if you had a chance to get them, I'm guessing you would have been pretty happy. Like probably the best like 3-and-D technically. Like you're not counting Kevin Durant because he's like your everything, but like Aaron Aflalo might have been like pretty much the guy that you would go after there.
Yeah, it's a weird draft in hindsight for sure, and especially like obviously Greg Oden.
Yeah, and definitely in hindsight.
Greg Oden injury obviously skews everything for historical purposes of what was the expectation at the time.
Yeah. So moving on to 2008, this was a draft that had like a really deep freshman class, or at least it was considered that, but many of them turned out to be pretty good players. And then, I would say the best player in this draft ended up being a sophomore. And the guy that I have is the Hall of Fame. I have him as the only Hall of Fame guy. You could probably argue one more, but I have Russell Westbrook. I guess you could argue Kevin Love.
I will. Yeah, I was going to say I put Kevin.
You're going to argue Kevin Love?
I would argue for Kevin Love.
Let me have it.
Because I think in Minnesota he was such a force of his scoring and rebounding.
They never made the playoffs.
They're a dreadful team. But he did. He does redeem himself being on those championship team with LeBron.
Yeah.
And I just think
where he was like the fourth best player.
Oh, totally. Because obviously you had Kyrie as well. But
And maybe he was the fourth best player. Oh, Tristan played better than him for sure. I think J.R. Smith might have been playing better in that series.
How dare you?
In the series,
That
yeah.
is-
Like I think Kevin might have been the fifth best player in that series.
I don't know.
Yeah, tough time against Golden State, man.
I think just Kevin, as far as just like scoring, rebounding,
He made 5 All-Star teams.
yeah.
And
hopefully,
I certainly think there's a case for him, and
hopefully he gets himself,
he would be like my second guy in that draft.
and hopefully he gets himself out of Cleveland and can, like he won't.
Have 2 more years.
Yeah, have 2 more years on.
But just like think about it, also like guys in this class have played 12 years.
Yeah,
like that's pretty crazy. Like that's I know like careers are longer and everything like that, but like odds are like not much is happening for a number of these guys in these next few years. Like,
oh, totally. A lot
it's
of them
downhill from here. Like,
have hit the end of the road. I mean, I think Kevin still has a couple, years he can do. Because again, now he's like really extended his shooting ability.
Oh, he's had that for years, man.
No, he has. Like even in high school. I mean, I remember we went to go see this one game with Kevin Love when he was in high school against this school called Westview in Oregon that had a big guy that ended up committing to Gonzaga, but never like
Andy Pauling.
Pauling and Kevin Love.
He weighed about 200 pounds.
Kevin Love did miss 1 3-pointer in that game, to my recollection, but I swear he hit every other shot he took, and like free throws included, and just was dominant.
Yeah,
insanely dominant against someone who was skinny but like taller than him, and just like made him feel like an amateur. Like
Kevin was 270. This guy was 200. Like,
yeah, if he was on a good day,
it was over. So yeah, I have. So the guys I have as contending pieces I do put Kevin there, because he was, and then like that year before, I think he would have been even better, and if Olynyk hadn't ripped his shoulder out of his socket. And then I have to have Derrick Rose, because when Derrick Rose was at his best, he was definitely a contending piece.
and he
was on like the best in the league, won MVP, won the first game of the series, then proceeded to get his ass stomped in 2011.
But I think he still has those flashes in games sometimes of like, this is a really
would say no.
So, yeah, not consistently.
Like he's fine, but that like he's having flashes in games for a team that is like one of the worst.
It's the worst teams in the league, yeah. But hey,
exactly.
Out there.
And like when he was on Cleveland, like Cleveland was just like, we're good.
I know. Obviously, that never looks good.
Yeah. So I have this next guy is a contending role player, but he looked like a contending piece this year, like honestly, before he got hurt, unfortunately. But Goran Dragic, who at the very least, I think you have to call him a contending role player, like just such a unique finisher, great shooter. I'm guessing still has a couple years left. Like he made the All-Star game. It's like at such a late age too, and like it seems like hopefully this plantar fasciitis isn't too bad, because I think he could have a couple more good years. But yeah, probably not many more from him, but still has had a very good career. DeAndre Jordan, I think you put in that. The reason I don't call him, like I was thinking of contending piece with him, but I just think offensively, like he
I think like he can't be on the court at the end of the game, at the end of that tight game.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that, but like, yeah, he was really limited at times, and yeah, he's had a really good career, but yeah, I think more contending role player with him. Serge Ibaka is another one where I think more contending role player, but still like was a 6-man for an NBA championship team and was like the 3rd or 4th best player on like a number of pretty good teams. Roy Hibbert, another guy who I'd go contending role player, was on some good Indiana teams. Did Roy Hibbert make the 10-year mark? Let's see.
9.
Roy.
So close.
9.
But I will say this about
Roy gets the 9.
You know, super tall person. He's also the tallest person I've ever seen in person wearing Ed Hardy. Those are his 2
Oh,
claims.
wearing it.
Yeah. I've met taller people than Roy Hibbert, but none of them were wearing Ed Hardy. They all had better fashion sense than that. But Roy.
You got a point, sir. You got a point. I have George Hill. He's been on a number of really good teams and
solid.
Contending role guy. Brooke Lopez. This year, I feel like he was one. Granted, in the playoffs, they eventually get waxed, so maybe not. But yeah, he has to be up there in this draft also. Then I go to role players. I have Danilo Gallinari, and I think he could be a contending role player, but it's just like he really has never been on a team that seems to be in contention. So that hurts. I don't know. It just gives me some pause in putting him there. But, you know, obviously a great scorer and still a valuable player in the league, and I think has a few more good years left. Nicholas Batum, who I would have loved to have seen be a contending role player, but I think you just have to put him as a role player and feel like his career is pretty much over.
If Brandon Roy stays healthy, Portland stays on this course. Yeah, like Batum's in a different light. But
Courtney Lee, I thought about contending role, but like even when he was with Orlando in like starting, he wasn't necessarily like a guy you were like, oh, I'm like stoked on Courtney Lee. He was more of a role guy. JaVale McGee, definitely a role guy. Maybe having him slightly too high in this equation, but he's been on some good teams over the last little while, and he's a fun player and good in limited minutes. Ryan Anderson is a guy who I just feel like when he was at his best, like he was a pretty good role player. On some like not amazing teams, but yeah, he was a good role player.
Yeah, he's a shooter.
Good stretch big guy, a good offensive rebounder. Then in this draft, you also have like Maurice Spates and Michael Beasley, of course.
Robin Lopez also, you know, like again, like
oh yeah, Rolo.
Not as stout offensively as
damn, dude. Oh god, the guy I forgot is Eric Gordon. He should absolutely be in. I would have him at like after Danilo and role players. So yeah.
He's fitting a good role right now in Houston.
Yeah.
You know, obviously their offense might change next year, but
yeah. So yeah, we have like about 15 guys there. We named a couple more. Yeah, DJ Augustine is probably in the mix too, to be among that group. In this draft, you have 21 guys with over 10-year careers, an amazing 34 guys who have played at least 6 years in the NBA. Oh yeah, Nick Pekovic, man. Omar Ashik, remember him? So yeah, it turns out to be like a decent draft. Probably not like the high-end outcome for everybody in this draft. Russ, I think, reaches like his like pretty much top outcome you could think of. Like, you could ask Russ to be a better shooter, but I just don't know if he could do much more than what he's done. Like, maybe decision making in certain situations. But yeah, Russell Westbrook has been the best player from this draft. And then there have been some other really good careers. So yeah, probably not like your expected scenario for this draft, but still like some really good years out of it and a number of really solid players. So yeah, like this draft went like pretty deep.
No, this is pretty solid draft, especially like at the top end a little bit later. I just say, yeah, unfortunately, just like Michael Beasley, OJ Mayo, those are kind of misses. But I mean, I think you make up for that with like Love, Westbrook, right after the Lopez twins. Like, I mean, I think there was some depth to this draft for sure.
Mm-hmm. You know who else was one? Joe Alexander. Boom. But yeah, let's move on to 2009. Talk about like combine wonders. Like Joe Alexander If you're looking at like the draft combine this year, where like everybody was like breaking records, like that was like Joe Alexander, like
No, it's like, but it's
broke
like,
like every freaking record, and
hey, well, this
people are like, "Oh my God, look how athletic this guy is!" And
did you do any of it with a basketball in hand? Yeah.
Can he play?
So moving, 2009.
Moving on, 2009. This was a draft where you had a guy at the top of the draft who you were like, okay, this guy is going number one. After that, there was conversation. I don't remember feeling like as stoked on this draft as I was 2008. This draft is way better at the top. Like it's crazy better.
I think Harden. I think a lot of people outside of the Pac-12 didn't really see him that much. And
I don't know. I think Harden was still like considered pretty highly. The guy that ends up being the best player, like from a career perspective, just because of everything he's done and accomplished, Stephen Curry. So I have Stephen Curry. He is one of my championship centerpieces, and I have him as at that level. So to me, that is a higher level than anybody else in this class. He has won 3 championships. You can say he's never been the best player during the finals. I think that's kind of gobbledygook and whatever. Like I just think he's been fantastic, and you have to say he's the main reason that Golden State has been as good as they were over those 5 years.
He changed and again, he made it so he's unguardable anywhere within like.
Yeah, he like changed the game.
Radius of the basket.
He completely changed the game of basketball. He was playing it at like a level of efficiency that is just absolutely ridiculous. He had at least one of the best seasons in NBA history in 2016. He's one of the 15 best players of all time too. You could probably go between he and Kevin Durant. You likely take Durant because of career longevity. Drafted a couple years before, but still, like, yeah. The amazing thing to me, like as I mentioned during the sibling episode, is like Stephen Curry doesn't have more points. Like he's missed time due to injury, and that's like probably a large part of it. But yeah, so Stephen Curry to me, number 1 player in this draft. And then when you go to, I think there are a couple Hall of Famers, and they would be. One I feel is a higher level than the other, and that's James Harden is the higher level one, and to me like a top 30 player of all time, and probably rising up one of the best scorers in NBA history.
As scorers, he's on that. He's
on amazing, like revolutionary, and next to no one getting to the free throw line. You can talk about model rules, whatever. He's winning it.
He gets to the free. He knows how to play this game. He gets there.
He really does. He really does. And yeah, like just skill wise, he's ridiculous. Blake Griffin he's still a good player, but yeah, I feel those 2 players quite a bit in front of him. When ESPN did their top 74 players, Blake Griffin, I don't believe was in there, but you'd have to figure he's hovering around there. He's had a fantastic career and been part of at least a number of good Clipper teams. Would be nice to see him like get traded to a team that contends, but was traded to Detroit. So yeah,
he took the wrong turn. Yeah,
we'll see what happens there. Well, I don't know if it was necessarily his fault, but yeah, he is there right now. As far as contending pieces, I think you'd rather have one than the other, but I want to put both of them just because I think you have to give this guy like some credit for being on some good teams. I have DeMar DeRozan and Drew Holiday. And word is Drew Holiday is getting traded, and you're hoping to a contending team. It will be very interesting if he does. He is a great guard defender, can defend either guard position, and probably even step up and defend the wing, and then provides you like the offensive kick as well. So I would say you probably have him over DeRozan if you're looking for like a piece for a contending team. But DeRozan was on some really good teams and was a really good scorer in his own right. Yes, he never takes threes, and that drives you insane. but he could really get buckets,
Oh,
and
yeah, he got the
was
Raptors.
a matchup issue for a lot of guys.
He got the Raptors super far. It's just unfortunately, yeah, like
Yeah, unfortunately, LeBron James exists.
yeah, LeBron did
Um,
this, and then like Kawhi, yeah, Kawhi was just that one, notch up.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, God, come on. Yeah. Like, he's not, if you're going by my system, he's more than one notch up. But yeah, then contending role players, I have one, and that is Danny Green. And I think you just have to put him at this point. He's been on 3 different championship teams, 3 different teams. And San Antonio, you got Toronto, and then he won his second in a row this year with the Lakers.
And he's still under contract, so he'll be back for the Lakers next year.
Yeah. And you can say what you want about Danny this year and the shooting struggles, but yeah, I think you at the very least have him as a contending role player because of everything he's done and the fact that he's been on all these championship teams and played a role. And then as far as role players go, I have Jeff Teague, who was at one time an all-star. You could probably have him as a contending role player, but I felt like he was maybe like less on Atlanta than some of the other guys I had mentioned. Taj Gibson, I think has just had a really solid career and was on like some pretty decent teams. I'll say Ty Lawson, even though Ty Lawson got like kicked out of China, right?
Yeah, he just got kicked out of China for posting a picture at a strip club in China.
Come on.
The girls there are thick.
Yeah, well,
people should not be hating on them.
He may not be lying. Darren Collison is another guy, just like pretty good role player, like good like backup guard basically. Or,
he has that speed
starter.
Gear.
Patrick Beverly. What were you saying about Darren Collison?
I was saying good speed. I was gonna say Patty Mills.
You didn't let me finish, Jason.
Beverly.
So I had Patrick Beverly. And yeah, obviously was still with Clippers, and now you hear that they're trying desperately to get a point guard. But Patrick Beverly has his role. And the last guy who I had was Patty Mills, and Patty Mills has been on some good Spurs teams and just a fun, quick guard, like almost like a better version of Aaron Brooks, let's say. And
but not as cool because he didn't go to Oregon, so
he lit Oregon. That's one cool thing they used to do. Because the one thing I was very well aware of when Patty Mills was finally playing for Australia, I was like, oh yeah, that was the guy that lit us up.
That was a harsh awakening. Yeah, the one guy, like looking back at this draft too, it's like that, injuries and a lot of things, but just a player that, story-wise I always loved was DeJuan Blair.
Oh man, yeah, the guy with no ACL who we knew he would have a short career.
Sure, because he had like no kneecaps, but
he was also like he had a longer career, I think, than Hasheem Thabeet, right? Like
totally.
He flipped over his back.
he did 7 years in the league. Thabeet did 5.
Yeah. Look up DeJuan Blair, Hasheem Thabeet, people. You will not be disappointed. It was an awesome thing in college. Oh, Omri Caspi, I guess, is a possibility there too.
And he was.
I would think Tyreek Evans, maybe. Yeah. You even have like James Johnson, Wayne Ellington. But yeah, it's my list. I'm sticking to it. Yeah, DeMar Carroll was like the 5th guy on that Atlanta starting lineup where 4 guys made the All-Star team.
And then Ricky Rubio too. And then you look at these.
Ricky Rubio. I have to have.
Look at this. This was the Minnesota point guard draft special. You get Rubio, but you're like, okay, we got a point guard now. But you're like, no, we need more. So you go Johnny Flynn, and then you're like, okay, we have 2 point guards now. That's great. We have and then you're like, no, that's not enough. Let's also get Ty Lawson.
But they traded Ty Lawson.
I know, but it's still like the dumbest.
Yeah, it was weird. You're absolutely correct. It was weird. It made no sense.
Schmo will always go down as
10-year careers. We have 17. Granted that this is only up to 11 years, and Ricky Rubio will join that next year. I guess Jonas Jerebko is still around too. Pat Bev very well could play 2 more years and get there. but yeah, so as far as the 6-year mark, we have 33 people. And then very many of them not playing like tons of games. And yeah, you're pretty low, and like then you're kind of like reaching on some of the rule guys. But yeah, let's move on to
And
2010.
you also have the Dickie V special here. Nicolaitis,
Yeah.
who's in this draft.
And yeah, so in 2010, obviously, like, okay, so we're finally at the point where like the 10-year plateau doesn't really like make tons of
Isn't
sense.
it applicable?
Like,
Yeah.
that this draft class, like their 10th year was this last season, but yeah, we'll go over at least like longevity with them to an extent. But in 2010, the guy that I have in the category of Hall of Famers, I feel like he's already done enough to reach the Hall of Fame, Paul George. And yes, it like was pretty agonizing watching Paul George in the
For
playoffs.
playoff for someone who called himself playoff P, he yeah.
And like I did really hate hearing that he was like kind of like, you know, struggling mentally and stuff like that. So
No, I like him as a person. Yeah, personally, like I.
that touched my heart. I won't lie, but yeah, he did the times. Let's just say for the people, there were some people that were saying that Paul George was the better player between he and Kawhi Leonard,
And
and
those
I think
people are insane.
yeah.
But I think Paul George is a great player. Like,
No. But yeah, obviously, like having those two levels of wings, and then he was third in MVP voting the season before. But yeah, he you'll see where I have Kawhi Leonard on this list after that. But yeah, Paul George, I feel is like head and shoulders above everybody else in this class. Contending pieces, I have two. I have Gordon Hayward, who I still think can be like a pretty good player on a contending team, and was looking like a pretty good player for Boston, as they, you know, had a great series with Miami. And then I still feel like John Wall has never really, like, Washington's never really, to me, like been a contender.
gone that far, yeah.
But John Wall could be that. Like, yeah, like I just feel like he's pretty special, and I'm guessing he'll come back and still be pretty good. And I could still see John Wall being a pretty good player on a pretty good team. So that's why I have him there. And they're like two guys who, like, I think still could, if they add a little bit more to their resume, like still could hit the Hall of Fame plateau. I had to have this guy as a contending role player, but he's never like really been that yet. Like even when he was on Golden State, like it was kind of weird. And then obviously didn't get the chance this year on the Lakers. It would have been really interesting to see how he fit in if he were healthy. But DeMarcus Cousins, I just feel like, you know, you could see him being one of like the 4 or 5 best guys on a competing team.
No, just yeah, he's had
hasn't really happened for him in like the best manner so far.
he's had a terrible injury luck with those Achilles.
Yeah. Derek Favors is another guy who I feel like, you know, could be like a big man on like a really good contending team. And then Eric Bledsoe, who obviously was one of the better players on Milwaukee. It just so happens that Milwaukee hasn't hit the finals yet, and kind of had that disappointing exit in the playoffs. And then you hear that he is on possibly the trading block as well. Role players from this draft from 2010, I have a bunch. You can question the effectiveness of all of them, I feel.
Yeah.
I have some that I'll name. Hassan Whiteside, who obviously you can question just how much he means to winning. Greg Monroe, who the Raptors luckily like cut, I think, like had off the team. So they had no lottery picks on their championship team, which was kind of cool, when Greg Monroe would have ruined that. So thank you for being cut, Greg Monroe. Lance Stevenson, who at a time was like on, you know, a pretty good Indiana team, and gave I guess it was Cleveland at the time a scare, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like,
Cleveland?
It was a little bit of I think it was both, but I remember he was breathing LeBron's ear.
Yeah. So we always remember. And LeBron played with him too.
Yeah. They
But
put it up, yeah.
yeah. Also, I say Evan Turner. It's tough, but you know what? He was like pretty crucial during Game 7 against the Nuggets.
Yeah.
Year before. Yeah.
He's
So
a big guy.
Blazers Game 7 against the Nuggets.
A
And,
taller guy that like can take the ball up the
2019.
court a little bit. Like he definitely has a role, but obviously not someone you want to be like your go-to guy or anything. But
yeah. Avery Bradley, who people kind of missed for the Lakers, was a really good like first line of defense. But it turns out they did not need him to win an NBA championship. Al-Farouq Aminu, like he's a role player. That's what he is.
oh, that's his. Yeah, no, totally. But he extended his range a little bit. He can shoot the three. You don't
Play some
want that.
defense.
Yeah.
That's Al-Farouq. Ed Davis, you know what he's doing. Definitely a role guy, like in the truest sense. And then Patrick Patterson, I think, had some good years as like a role guy too. At least like with Toronto was really solid there, and with a few other teams. So yeah, those are like role guys in the truest sense, but yeah, none of them you're necessarily like clamoring for if you're trying to build a contending team. But still like guys you're kind of okay with. Then so 10-year careers, it's only a few. Right now it's just 9 guys. I think there will be obviously a few more, like John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins miss an entire season. Lance maybe still gets back in the league. I'm not sure. Hassan could certainly play like a couple more years. But yeah, it'll be very few from this draft. And then guys who have had 6-year careers or longer, you only had 25.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Got a few like you're
not even a first round. Yeah, and then Nem Bjelica, I think next year I'll make it 26. But yeah, not too many more who I think you have to worry about or wonder about. So moving on to 2011, we have another championship centerpiece. And that is Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard's a championship centerpiece, people.
Oh, 100%.
It happened. And yes, it may not have happened this year. Don't be so sure it doesn't next year. Like, it could still happen. We'll see what the Clippers do. I think it's going to be like a tougher time for them. And like, they'll have a cap situation to deal with. And, they had some outgoing free agents likely.
A new coaching situation, so.
Yeah. What situation?
New coaching, like new coaching.
Oh, yeah. So. Yeah. They'll have a different championship coach. And so, yeah, you have Kawhi Leonard as your championship centerpiece. Hall of Famers. Pretty good. In this one, you have 3. I think these guys have already cemented their case as Hall of Famers. You got Kid Kyrie. Uncle Drew. Let's get buckets.
Yeah.
Second best player on a championship team. Still could be on a few more contending teams. Let's hope health permits, and let's hope that he says less crazy shit. You have Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler was the best player on a finals team this year, and he like hovering around top 10 best player in the league. Has been a really good player for a number of years, and a guy that you can at least build a solid playoff team around. And I think could possibly be like the second best player on a championship team if he gets into the right situation. And then you have Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson has 3 championship rings, is one of the best shooters in NBA history. Missed this entire year, unfortunately. But we'll be back, and I think has a number of good years.
A lot of good shooting left in him.
Yeah, so he's, I think definitely shooting up towards being like a top, 70, 80 player in NBA history, and I think we'll get even higher. And then the guy I have just below that, and I think there still is a chance, and I at least called him a contending piece because I think in the right situation he could be one. Is Kemba Walker. So I had Kemba there. Contending role players. I have one who did it and like just was that. And you hear that there are a number of teams that are very interested in his services, and the Los Angeles teams and Toronto. Tristan Thompson, I feel, was likely like the third guy on that Cleveland team that won the NBA championship. He was just like such a good matchup against them, got those crucial rebounds, was a really good defender. He had a really good series. So yeah, you had Tristan at least play that role. A guy who I feel like could have in the right situation is Tobias Harris. Another guy like with like the Al Horford like contract thing, like just got overpaid, but still is a very good player. And I think like in the right circumstances, like, you know, if he wasn't making like $30 million, like would be a very valuable like, third or fourth piece. Yeah, exactly. Then role players have a bunch. Nikola Vucevic, he has been an all-star before, and I think in the best situation possible would be like, you know, a solid center with like a just ridiculous roster built around him, or not around him, but like him part of that, rather than being like, you know, the team's best player. But yeah, it's kind of tough to do that with him. Jonas Valanciunas, could you say like the Raptors won the championship with Jonas? I think it would have been harder, and like I just think Marc Gasol was kind of what they needed at the time. But Jonas still like just is a guy who is going to put up numbers and be like a, you know, a matchup issue for a number of teams because he is huge and he is talented around the basket. The Morris twins, I have both of them. I have Marcus, I have Markieff. As we saw this year, they were good role players for good teams.
Yeah, separate sides of Los Angeles, but
in different ways. But yeah, Keefe, of course, throwing pass into oblivion, and then coming back that next.
You watched the movie The Sixth Man the night before, so we thought that Kadeem Harrison was going to be there for him.
Yeah. Turns out, it was definitely more Dwayne Wayne than Dwayne Wade. Let's just put it that way. Isaiah Thomas. He's so much fun, and like he's a guy that you could see like it would have been perfect like as that sixth man off the bench, and then had like the huge season before, so like maybe we're like even like underranking him, but yeah, I just had him there as a role player. Certainly was better than that in his best year, but I think collectively you probably put him there. And then I have two European guys, one who's out of the league, but I think you have to have him, and I think would have fit that role to a T, and that's Nikola Mirotic. And then the other one who unfortunately was hurt this year in the playoffs, as Utah gave Denver everything they had, and maybe this guy would have put Utah over the top. Who knows? Bojan Bogdanovic is the guy that I have there, and that is the 2011 draft. So those are the players and the categories.
Reed had, showed a couple good years, but Denver wasn't that great at that time.
Who?
Kenneth Faried.
Oh, Kenneth Faried. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like the one player that's probably, like if there was a thing above championship centerpiece, it'd be whatever Jimmer Fredette is.
Yeah, true enough. But what about Derek Williams, man?
I'm team Jimmer.
All in on Derek.
I was high. I was actually really high on Derek Williams at the time.
So guys who have played at least 6 years in the NBA, you already have 31.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then a number who are just like kind of like out of the league, and yeah, I wish this thing just showed like active players. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, and then like what we're saying, when we're getting to Kenneth Faried, like yeah, you just kind of wonder, because it feels like when Denver started getting good is like when they like stopped playing Kenneth Faried.
Yeah, like he kind of like his day kind of came, but there was a period.
Yeah,
but it's like was that window sustained enough to like look back on him like that?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's move on to 2012. And we have, so I have these three guys as Hall of Famers, different levels each, I feel. I have Anthony Davis as a Hall of Famer. I don't have him as a championship centerpiece. He's like almost there. Like he's really close. But yeah, so I right now I have him as a Hall of Famer, but I have him as a very high level Hall of Famer, and I think he's like he's going to be in the category really soon of like top 25, 30 like best player of all time. And I think we'll get higher. And I have Damian Lillard, who I feel is like, so you have Anthony Davis is like the tier of Hall of Famer. Damian Lillard is another tier of Hall of Famer. Then I have the third Hall of Famer, and that's Draymond Green. So to me, those three guys have already done enough to make the Hall of Fame. Draymond is just such a unique and like crazy talent, and was like a huge key to unlocking those great Golden State Warriors teams, and was I feel like maybe like the third or fourth best guy on like a number of those teams, and had some fantastic moments. And yes, like the last couple years, I feel like he hasn't been like the Draymond Green of the past, but I still feel like there's maybe like a little more to unlock there.
He's going to play a role on this team as they are still kind of locked in with him, Steph, Clay.
Yeah. Yeah, like one of the best defensive players of all time, at least like most versatile, and then this incredible passer, like can kind of start offense.
Super high IQ, like exactly. On both ends.
Oh yeah, basketball genius. And you could see that from his commentary as well. And then I have Contending Pieces. This is another guy, like I feel like he's never really been on like you would say like a contending team, but I feel like he could be a contending piece in the right situation, and that would be Bradley Beal.
I think he's got that.
One of the best scorers in the NBA, really great shooter, can get to the basket, like, Bradley Beal, like matchup nightmare. The other one I have in Contending Pieces is Chris Middleton, who was like probably he's definitely the second best player on Milwaukee.
Yeah.
You just kind of wonder now if like he's that second guy, or maybe they need somebody else like to help Giannis out. Who knows? But yeah, certainly a very good player, and could be like your third or fourth guy on like a really, really good team, and was the second guy on a really, really good team this year. And then Contending Role Players, I have Harrison Barnes because of what he did with Golden State, and like you saw him in that role, and yes, he was like the fifth or like sixth guy on that team, but yeah, like you saw what he could do and the versatility that he brings in the right situation. The guy who has never really been in that situation, but I feel like if you were in the right situation, and this is, I'm probably with his next contract maybe, is Andre Drummond. I just would be kind of interested to see him on like a really good team, and not have to be like one of the best couple players on that team. It's certainly like has been a fantastic rebounder, and has made a couple all-star teams. And then role players, I thought about having him as a contending role player because of what he did this last year, and then he's been on like some good teams in the past. Jay Crowder, so he was at the top of my role players. Evan Fournier, who's been one of Orlando's best players the last few years, like that's as role player as you can get, considering they've been like in that 7-8 spot. Maurice Harkless, definitely a guy you would consider like a role guy. Jeremy Lamb, Terrence Ross, Will Barton, and Deion Waiters are my others. So yeah. just a bunch of guys who are like, some decent wings with issues, but still, I would count them in the role player category.
And then if we're talking outside of basketball, I'd also throw Myers Leonard in there because he just seems like, again, super good dude, and he's probably one of the better players in the league at shotgunning course lights.
You speak for yourself. So
He's one of the better ones I've seen. As far as
no.
and he's touring the country right now, and he and his wife, they did a custom coach bus of like looks like a Coors Light train.
Yeah, you could call it like a rally of sorts. Who else holds the rallies in COVID? Oh God. Okay. So yeah, let's go into like career longevity. This draft seems to have, at least right now, there are 25 guys who have had over 6-year careers. And yeah, I guess there could be a few more coming up in the future, like Thomas Satoransky. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. As far as guys who have like been in the NBA like that whole time, you have 21. So yeah, quite a few guys. It was considered like a pretty good draft.
But we get to end on the highest of high notes.
Yeah, like this was considered a dreadful draft. And then it ended up having like a couple guys where you're like really impressed. One of them was the 15th pick. And right now I have him as a Hall of Famer. Like he's obviously a Hall of Famer. He could retire now and be a Hall of Famer.
Okay, yeah.
Will he be a championship centerpiece? That is a thing where I think, I'm guessing that's where he's headed towards. But the guy I have is the much higher level between the two Hall of Famers that I have from this class is Giannis Antetokounmpo. And yeah, I feel like he will be a championship centerpiece. He'll eventually get to that level. I would do it now, but yeah, he's never won a championship. So yeah, we're thinking that he's likely headed there. And with all of these guys, it's in the right circumstances. But yeah, he's, a Hall of Famer with a chance to be a championship centerpiece, whereas I don't feel like the other Hall of Famer necessarily has that chance. But the other Hall of Famer is Rudy Gobert. So you have both of those guys. And yeah, I feel like Rudy Gobert has obviously been like
Defensive Player of the Year.
Present. Yeah. And yeah, he's been on many good teams, has helped Utah stay relevant for quite a long time. And yeah, it is kind of funny that Kevin Durant like points out is like for like a defensive player of the year, he's like really easy to score on. But he has been defensive player of the year and like was the runner up to Giannis this year. And yeah, like obviously he is this incredible like post defender and rim protector. So yeah, those two guys head and shoulders above the class. I feel like Giannis, different tier, Rudy like under that, but I have them both at like the Hall of Famer level. And then contending role players, I have Victor Oladipo. I feel like at his best, he was that. You wonder like the last couple years, he just has not been the same as he was like that last year where he was really, really good. But yeah, he's somebody who I feel like, you just hope that maybe it was just like injuries and something that he can get over, but is a very good player and, is a guy who can help on both ends of the floor. This next player is a guy who's like just a master on like one end of the floor, but has always just been like below all-star level, but still has been the second best player on a team for quite a long time and was the second best player on a team that made the conference finals only 2 years ago, and that's CJ McCollum. So I have him contending role player category. I had no contending pieces here. I have Steven Adams as a contending role player. I feel like in the
definitely. I think as a center, he definitely.
Yeah, I think salary is kind of like one of the issues there too. But yeah, Steven Adams is just a beast. I feel like I kind of had to have this guy here because of what just happened. But and I think in a large part because you have like two freaking like revolutionary guys playing with each other. That sounds really bad. But playing together in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Yeah, it. I had Contavious Caldwell Pope, and if you look at that like series, he may have been like the third guy in that series.
He had some games. He definitely had some games.
He and I like yeah, like in that last game, I think he was pretty key. He's been a little bit all over the place and kind of like more like a volume shooter than a knockdown guy. But I think he shot pretty well this year, and he was the 8th pick in that draft. I feel like in a redraft he'd be like right around that level, and he was at least a key to the Lakers winning the championship and played well enough where they could win the title. I feel like with that you kind of have him in contending role players. Role players, Dennis Schroeder,
yes,
who had a really good year, and he didn't win. So Montrez won 6th Man of the Year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But Dennis was like, I think.
But yeah, Dennis will be busy too, because again, like the rumor as of this recording is, possibly DeAndre Ayton for Chris Paul. That was going around. I mean, again, I don't know if it's happened, nothing signed.
There's some salary that needs to be
oh no, I like
taken into account there too.
There's still some variable too.
That's why I'm
Chris
wondering about that.
Chris Paul moves out and you have like just he and Shea, like, yeah, maybe good opportunity for him.
Yeah. I think at the very least he's been like a role player so far in his career. Otto Porter, who you were kind of hoping maybe to get to that higher category, but is like a good role guy. Tim Hardaway Jr. just played a nice role this year with Dallas and showed that he could be a good scorer on a good team. Mason Plumlee is that role guy, like he's truest sense of the word, role guy. It's like, your third big. Cody Zeller, I also think is that like this draft. Yeah, I was. There may be some guys from other drafts who I could say are better players than these, but yeah, I just came up with like a bunch of bigs like at the end of this one. It's like Cody Zeller, Georgie Jang, and Nerlens Noel.
You didn't put Kelly. I don't like go with like Kelly Olynyk over Nerlens.
Oh yeah, I should have put Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's done that at Boston. He's doing that at Miami now.
Yeah. I should have put Kelly. So the totals from these are 11 drafts. I have 5 championship centerpieces. I have 21 Hall of Famers. I have 16 contending pieces. And I have 32 contending role players. And then there were guys I added for role players, so I don't even know how many, but it was 70-ish. I'll just say 70-ish role players. So yeah, that's when you add it up, like from contending role players, like up, you have like 48, 69, 74. So that's like you're looking at that and thinking like, if I get to the 7th pick, like there's no guarantee. Like like, and it probably won't be the 7th pick, but like let's say you're bored. Let's say you're working on your big board, and you're like at the 7th pick, and you're thinking like, is this guy going to help a contending team? He may not. Like it's tough. It's really tough to find those like few good players at the top of the draft. And
again, there's so much variability. Actually, I kind of I wanted to bring up this quote that actually I think I sent over to you earlier, but this was a quote from Al Caruso today. About the NBA and like players and attitudes and things like that. He goes, this is his quote. He goes, "A big reason guys get stuck in the G League is because they don't realize the position they're trying out for. It's like going to a job interview thinking you're going to be the CFO of a company, and they're just looking for a guy to come clean the bathrooms."
Yeah.
So, it's about like, it's
I think a large part of it is knowing who you are.
yeah, knowing who you are, and like, I get it. To get to this level, you do have to be very confident in your game, but it's like, unfortunately, there is these championship pieces. There's a small number of them, and
I remember
everyone
seeing
else
Scotty Hobson. There's draft interview with Scotty Hobson and him talking about how he was like thinking he was going to be like an all-star and like he was the best player, and you're just like think to yourself, you're like, this guy's like not going to get drafted in the first round. Like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a large part of it is knowing who you are, knowing what you do well, and knowing what a team wants from you.
Yeah.
And then, like, let's say you get in the situation to play with LeBron James, like, you're going to have to do something about your game.
Yeah, it's not going to be about you.
There's a reason that LeBron James gets to do what he wants to do, and other players have to, kind of do whatever to make up for that because of his insane efficiency and his ability to run a team and make them a championship contender.
No, so I definitely think like that's that mental aspect is just huge coming into the draft of like knowing who you are and just being
knowing your role.
Yeah.
And knowing what you're good at, knowing what the team needs, and then buying into that, and working on that. And, like I guess a big part of it is just, unfortunately, it's luck in terms of where you're drafted and in terms of how a team develops you and all of those things too, and the structure they have for development. But yeah, we just what we want to do with this is to give you guys an idea that you're likely not going to get an all-star with the 15th pick.
Or just like
there was one Kawhi Leonard that was a championship centerpiece. That was insane luck.
Yeah, no, totally. And then Giannis is right below there, but it's like
true. Both of those guys are 15 picks. Yeah,
Kawhi, Giannis, and every other 15th pick. So yeah, it's just kind of for fans, it's just getting you might just get a good role player, and that's okay.
Yeah,
and that's probably.
And then just there isn't always a franchise player in every draft. Like if you look at some of these Hall of Famers, they aren't necessarily like guys you would consider franchise players. They were just like perennial all-stars, like really good players, and guys who may be like a second or third best player on a championship team. So not every draft has a championship centerpiece or like a guy that you consider. I don't know, because the franchise player, I guess, is like there's a broad definition, but I would think a franchise player is somebody that is either leading you to contention or leading you to a championship.
No, totally. Again,
it isn't always there.
Someone has to score the most points on every team. Someone has to get paid the most. So yeah, like that franchise player, could be a loose definition. But yeah, it's like you want someone that could lead you to a championship year in, year out, that you're consistently trying to build around.
So yeah, I guess our question is like, on average, a draft usually has like maybe like 5 or so all-stars. Who do you guys think will be the NBA all-stars from the 2020 NBA draft? And we'll give that answer next week. How about that, Jace?
That sounds good. We'll put that out on our Twitter at Viseland. Let us know your thoughts on who you think out of this draft
Twitter question
could come out and become an all-star.
Yeah.
Who are those guys that you believe in outside of Oregon Duck Peyton Pritchard, who's going to be a many, many time all-star? No, I'm just kidding. But, wishful thinking. But let us know.
CBA all-star.
Hey, still counts. Don't go Ty Lawson, get yourself kicked out of the country. Not good for your career there. But let us know. We're going to post that on our Twitter at Viseland, and make sure you are checking us out. We are basically over the past week, we've actually gone and we've expanded to a bunch of different platforms. So you can pretty much find Viseland literally anywhere podcasts can be found. We are on Google. We are on TuneIn. So if you have a Tesla and you have your premium connectivity, you can listen to Viseland in your car very easily. We're obviously on Spotify, Apple, everywhere. So we're also if you go to anchor.fm, you can find Viseland, and it'll link out to every little place you can download and find our podcast. So great opportunities wherever, however you listen to podcasts. We will be there.
Yeah. And thank you guys so much for listening. Please like, subscribe. I am NBA Draft Mikey V on Twitter. He is at jvisenberg. You can email us at viselandpod@gmail.com. And also follow us on Twitter at Viseland.
Yep.
And we thank you for subscribing, sharing, liking, commenting. Answer our question. We're really interested in this. And then, tell us if we left anybody out or you feel somebody was miscategorized. But thank you once again.
And then make sure also to tune in next week, because that's going to be our final episode prior to the draft. So you
before the NBA draft.
So you get everything right before the draft. We're not going to do like those like Chad 40 kind of things where we tweet the pick right after it happens, like we pretended like it happened before. We're not doing any of that. This is going to be.
We may do that.
Maybe. We'll see at that time. But yeah, it's going to be our last one before the draft. We're going to give you a lot of breakdown intel and everything. So, share it with all your basketball friends. And we look forward to seeing you guys all next week.